Metallica, Robert Trujillo. Robert,
Hey, how you doing?
listen, man, I got to tell you, caught the show last night. First time I've seen Metallica. I've always been occupied when the shows have been on stuff. I'm still trying to find my mind. Absolutely blown away. You guys look like you're having like an absolute hoot on stage, but like a blast.
Yeah, that was fun. You know, when you get a venue like that, the Opera House, and then it sounds good. You know, at least from where we were on stage, you can feel every note. Me as a bass player, battling two guitars. You know, it's great to find your balance, and also the crowd. You know, what a great crowd. Smaller venue, nice and tight. It was fun, you know, and it was a situation where I kind of warm into it. It's like sound check. I was kind of a little bit out of it. I don't know, jet lag, whatever's going on. But then I decided, I said, you know what, I'm just gonna find my groove with this and see how it develops. And it just kind of brewed and percolated, and then all of a sudden it was like, yeah, you know, and I felt that I found my groove, and we found our groove, and we had a great time, all of us.
You guys done a couple club shows so far. What's the difference? I mean, what are your mental preparation difference between playing the big venues, which you really Metallica have become acclimatized to playing, then all of a sudden you're into a club? I mean, you don't have the stage, you don't have the pyro.
Well, it's actually a lot of fun because we have each other, and we have to kind of feed off of each other and really connect. And it's actually been an influence on our stage show, because we were just in Central America and we did some stadium dates there. And I found that we were spending more time together, you know what I mean? As opposed to like venturing off and, you know, every 20 minutes, hey, how you doing, James? You know what I mean? Or kind of reuniting with your bandmates at some point in the performance. We spent a lot more time together and kind of grooving and finding that balance. So it's been a great thing for us. You know, we're almost like, it's like you're reconnecting with the spirit of that, but you're also finding new fun ways to maybe possibly take that to the bigger stage. So it has its positives on a lot of different fronts, and I feel that where we're at now with the new songs, you know, it's a challenge. You know, you got new material, you're testing it. It's a great place to do it. Opera House. I mean, even at soundcheck, we played 3 songs for the very first time. We didn't play them live, but we tested them in the venue, and there was, you know, enough people there. It was kind of fun. You know, it's a great place to, you know, get your feet wet and try different things.
How's the initial bang of Hardwired been for the band? It seems like there's a renewed interest in the band. You guys seem like you're totally into it. Not that you ever weren't,
Right.
but you know, like there's little spikes and peaks and valleys and stuff.
Oh yeah, in a career, especially a career this long, you never know what you're gonna get, you know. And we make music for ourselves, and sometimes that pisses our fans off. And sometimes, I mean, it's like kind of you're winning them over, you're pissing them off. It's this ongoing roller coaster. But everyone seems to like what we're doing with this, and that makes us feel good. You know, it's like when they don't like it, it is what it is. You know, whatever. But the fact that people are embracing this music and the energy of it, and even just sonically, you know, I personally think it's an incredible sounding record, and I love what's happening with the rhythm section, and the tones are great. And I give full props to our producer Greg Fiddleman, who really made the sonic magic happen, and just being the mad scientist in the studio and taking chances and trying different things is really, really fun. But to take this journey live and bring these songs to life, and you know, and see that there's relevance, that people actually do care about Metallica still, in a time where it's challenging out there with rock bands, and you know, someone was asking me now, what's going to happen, you know, with the stadiums in the future with younger bands, and I said, well, hopefully the younger generation steps up and starts making music and brings real music to the world, because that's where it's going to come from.
I think there's about to be a true rock revolution. I think that, you know, you guys have always sort of fronted that by doing what you want to hear. You play the music you guys want to hear and stuff. And one positive I got out of the crowd last night was being up there is everybody was singing along to Atlas and Hardwired and Moth last night too. So, you know, your fans are embracing the new music probably just as fast as you guys are.
That's something that's been pretty interesting to me is seeing, you know, I mean, I could only see, well, in the venue last night I could see everybody, but, you know, to see that your fans are singing the lyrics and they've got big smiles and they're passionate as they are when they're singing Master of Puppets or some of the classic Metallica songs from the past, that's pretty cool because these are new songs. And a lot of times when you're playing new songs, that's when you see, you know, people just kind of like, it's like, hurry up already, let's get through this one.
Yeah.
But no, they want to hear them.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, cool, you know, let's see how it works with, you know, we're going to keep throwing them at them. So at some point we'll have a fair amount of tunes in there. We'll see how it goes, but so far so good.
All right, your writing process, the room, the writing room that you guys have on the road. How does that work when you're out and your downtime, you all hang together?
Well, we have I mean, new ideas come in different ways, and we do have a jam space, a jam room that has recording gear in there. Before we go on stage, we always warm up, but sometimes a jam evolves, and with someone like James Hetfield, you know, he plugs in his guitar, he turns a tone knob or volume knob or whatever, makes an equalization adjustment here, and he'll come up with a riff in like, you know, I don't know, 5-10 seconds, and he'll forget it if he doesn't have something to document it. So we always have, you know, the ability to record ideas. So a lot of the riffs are created, or at least are birthed sort of on the road. And then, you know, you go home, you come up with ideas, you got your iPhone or whatever, and you record stuff there. And then at a certain point, you bring it to the studio, and you share it with everybody. Lars, you know, of course, has to go through it and see what works for him. And then we jam. You know, we basically take the riffs and the ideas, and we jam on them, Lars and James and I, and we have fun with them, and we see where it goes. And oftentimes it'll sort of inspire a new idea, or it'll inspire a transition or a bridge section or whatever, and then you start sort of mixing and matching parts. And then it does become a process of elimination, because I think on this album there was like 1,000 ideas or something ridiculous, and a lot of them were James's ideas, and most of James's ideas were just so good. It was like, well, you know, Death Magnetic was more collaborative in some ways, with, you know, whether it was my ideas or Kirk's ideas and James's ideas, but this was like really mostly all James. So but again, my job as a bass player is to support the song and support the band, and who knows, maybe this next album is going to be different, and it's going to be collaborative again. Every album's a different experience.
It almost sounds like there's a box set of unreleased material waiting to happen one day down the road.
You never know. I mean, I always say, you know, the songs are long for a reason, because we have all these cool riffs and we want to slot them all in there, and you know, find a place for them in the arrangements. It's a good problem to have.
Yeah.
There
There are worse issues.
You know, at our age, to be able to have that creative energy to have an overabundance of cool riffs, I think is okay. You know, a lot of times as you get older, it's hard to find that magic. You know.
So I was caught an old interview of you years ago. You were talking about the time you were still with Suicidal Tendencies, and you guys actually opened it for Metallica one time. You up on the big stage, and you're like, "Oh my God, this thing is so huge." You felt like you hit the big time opening for them. What was it like to get the call?
It was awesome. Of course, it was awesome, but it's kind of surreal looking back, and yeah, you know, being in the band Suicidal Tendencies that actually toured with Metallica, and it was for a while. I mean, we did about a year with them. I think it was 93 and 94, Black Album tour. And I remember, you know, watching them play. You know, we would go up, do our thing, which was cool. For us, as Suicidal Tendencies, we were out there to win people over. You know, whether it was touring with Guns N' Roses or touring with Metallica. In fact, we were touring with both bands in the same summer. We would go with Metallica for 2 weeks, and then we'd jump over with Guns N' Roses, and this was at the height of both bands, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
So that was kind of an interesting journey for us. I think we had a much more positive response from the Metallica fans back then than the Guns N' Roses fans. But I remember, you know, watching Metallica, and it was so big, you know. It was like, well, these guys are like, you know, untouchable in a lot of ways in terms of the production. So it was very surreal for me years later to get the call to come down and audition, and really it happened because Kirk was into surfing, and he had called me through a mutual friend to see if there was any good surf spots in Southern California that I could take him to. And I did, because I loved the sport, and I took him to all these spots around Los Angeles, and we hit it off. And the interesting is we didn't talk much about Metallica, or I was playing with Ozzy at the time. We didn't talk much about Ozzy. It was about surfing and all that. But that kind of planted the seed, because a year later I did, you know, I got asked to come down and audition, and I was just happy to play some of the songs and say that, hey, I jammed with the guys. I was already working with Ozzy, so things were okay there. But, you know, ultimately getting the call to join the band and to be a member was very surreal. But I have to say, at the same time when they asked me to join, I was like, okay, the workload. I've got to learn over 20 years of catalog. I've got to learn the Saint Anger songs, which was like 12 crazy songs that they hadn't even rehearsed live. So it was a lot of work, and I'm always consumed by the amount of work in being productive, you know.
How do you prep for that?
You just got to put in the time, you know. You got to dig deep. I was living in LA at the time, and I wasn't married, and I didn't have kids, so it was pretty easy for me to come up to San Francisco, which is not too far, and just spend time and focus on what I needed to do. But I didn't feel like I really caught up until maybe, I don't know how many years, but it took a few years to actually catch up. And when I did, I said, okay, I feel caught up on the music and in the sets and everything, because it was constantly changing. I'd get these sets of their shows, and then I'd find out at the last minute that now they want to do these obscure songs. And I was like, but that's not on my list. You know, Phantom Lord's not on my list, and you know, and the truth is they were changing things. They wanted to pursue deeper cuts.
Yeah, yeah.
So that was more homework for me. Like, okay, well, I got to learn that song and that song, and some of it was like literally day of or a day or two before, and it was a lot of work. And I realized at a certain point it's better to stay ahead of the game. You know, so I started learning songs before they knew them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then years down the line, we eventually played them. In fact, Freight Ends of Sanity is an example of that, because we played that. It's a crazy song on the Justice for All album that had never been played, and we played it last summer. And I had worked on that thing like 6 years before, so it was like, sure, I'll play that song. You know,
You're totally ready for it.
I had a head start. Yeah.
Yeah. How do you, you know, the years of your time on stage, really to get to the point where you're really comfortable up on stage and your showmanship is there, do you really like transform into a different kind of performance being? Is there like there's regular Robert and then there's get out of my way, I'm on stage?
Yeah, you know, for me, what I've been doing lately is I just sort of let the show come to me. Of course, you stretch out, you get ready, you go through your routine. I'm the first one in the jam room, and I'm just basically there kind of reconnecting with the instrument, maybe going over some parts and stuff like that. And then James is always the second one in, so it's always James and I in there first. And Lars is the last guy in, you know. I mean, he sometimes, you know, he waits a while, you know, before he goes through his routine, and he finally shows up. And then we get the set, you know, because Lars fine-tunes the set and kind of decides, you know, what we would be playing. But you know, with all that, you know, once you hit the stage, it's like you can sort of force it, or you can find your niche and your groove and pace yourself. And rather than just being crazy and aggro and getting tense in throwing that all in there, I like the show to come to me, and then I like to naturally develop it and find that to get in the zone. You know what I mean?
Now, you were trained classically, but you trained as more on the jazz side?
Yeah, I went to jazz school when I was 19, and I was there for a year, and I met a lot of great musicians. Some of them I'm still friends with and still jam with sometimes. But the experience of meeting musicians from all over the world in one setting was really more important than playing through charts and that whole deal. It meant a lot to me, but a lot of that came from just listening to different styles of music and embracing jazz fusion in the late 70s and the 80s, and going to a lot of shows as a teenager. So I'm the type of player that really loves all music. I mean, my father used to, for fun, he was a hobby guitar player, and he played flamenco. So my earliest memories were hearing him and watching him play with that sort of bass player technique, at least finger style, on his flamenco guitar. And I had adopted that and kind of started realizing that bass was the instrument that I really enjoyed because it was funky. It was Motown, it was James Brown, it was all that stuff. Yeah, at the same time, it was Black Sabbath, and and Led Zeppelin had great bass lines. So that was the instrument for me.
How did the jazz training transfer over into all of a sudden you're playing metal?
Well, the metal thing sort of came by surprise. I went to school with the guitar player for Suicidal Tendencies at the time, Rocky George. We were great friends. I'm the one who turned him on to jazz rock music, to Al Di Meola, to John McLaughlin and in Weather Report and all these bands. And he was really into the Rolling Stones at the time. So we had this musical connection, and then we started going to shows together. In fact, I think we might even gone to Rush together. You know what I mean? He was really into a lot of that style of music as well. That's sort of where we started to really connect, was on a lot of the prog rock bands and stuff. And it was a fun time for music. That music was popular. They were playing a lot of the larger venues, and there was a lot of just fun energy and fun times. You could go see a band like Weather Report, and then the same week you'd go see Ozzy Osbourne, and you'd see a lot of the same fans, so it was a great time. But I feel that the jazz, for me, just allowed me to find, it made things less limiting, as a writer, mostly as a composer, and that's why I had a band called the Infectious Grooves, which really incorporated thrash, metal, but also really heavy edge and funk, inspired by a lot of the jazz funk players. But then there was like a hint of Parliament Funkadelic and the Sex Pistols, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I guess what I'm getting at, there was no rules, and that's what I kind of got from a lot of those crazy, wild funk fusion bands, and we just applied it with crazy vocals.
I got 2 minutes to talk about one of your big passions, is Jaco Pastorius. You did the big documentary on him, or I could call it a rockumentary. One of your mentors.
Yes.
A passion, labor of love for you.
An incredible journey, very passionate, very involved. The hardest thing I've ever done, the hardest journey I've ever taken, but very rewarding. I'm still actually been dealing with it lately with distribution companies and just, all that side of it. There's the making of the film and that whole experience. One thing that's very interesting that I'll sort of close with is when you're making, I have a lot of respect for documentary filmmakers, because the amount of money that it takes to make a great film is exuberant. It really is. I had a fair amount of favors, but even then, it's crazy. So there's a financial commitment that's really wild. But you're not doing it for any sort of financial gain. You're really doing it for the spirit of the artist and sharing the story. And that was my goal, was I want to share Jaco Pastorius' story, bring awareness to him, but also celebrate the music from that time, whether it was Joni Mitchell or Ian Hunter or Weather Report, or jazz in general, but also rock, and obviously we had Geddy Lee in the mix, and we had a Flea, and we had a really strong cast, and it turned into a bit of a celebration as well. So I'm always happy when people come up and say, "Hey, man, great film. I love the music, and now I'm a fan," whatever. And yeah. So anyway, but definitely the hardest thing I ever did, but I'm proud of it.
Yeah. Congratulations, man.
Thanks.
And by the way, amazing show again last night.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time today.
All right. Cool.